Shalom, Israel. First off, I just want to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahawashi, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and I just want to say peace and salutations to the elect Akim that's faithfully pushing the word in sincerity and truth. Just kind of want to bring out a few scripts today, just on the importance of Yahawashi and having that faith through the Spirit, of calling on His name, and just knowing that our righteousness is as a filthy rags, and that we're not justified by the law, even though we know that Yahawashi requires us to keep the law, because that seems kind of like argument for the day, so to speak, between these different Israelite camps. You got guys out there that try to pollute the doctrine, mainly IUIC, when they try to basically put that huge emphasis and strain for our people to try to keep the law, like that's the end all be all, when we know that everything as far as our righteousness, our salvation, it's all lies through the faith in Yahawashi. So the first precept that I wanted to get is in the book of Galatians, chapter 2. I'll start at verse 16. It says, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Yahawashi, even we have believed in Yahawashi Hamashiach, that we might be justified by the faith of Hamashiach and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. So, Paul, he's pretty much in this letter to the church of Galatia, he's making it plain, man, that no flesh shall be justified by the works of the law, because Israel, we went off and we weren't able to keep the law perfectly, That's why we always, read in Judges, the 5th chapter, that we're rehearsing the righteous acts right now. But Yahawashi, as that sacrificial lamb, he was the only man that came in the flesh and kept the law perfectly. And he was justified through the Father, but for being obedient, So we're supposed to be obedient to that spirit of Yahawashi, man, letting his mind be in us that was in Yahawashi. Now, of course, we're supposed to keep the law, because the scriptures talk about the law. That's a schoolmaster, that brings you into some of the understanding of Yahawashi, because he comes in the volume of the book. It is written of him. But at the end of the day, whatever laws you proclaim to keep, that's not going to justify your carnal flesh, But just going on, I'm going to get another script, actually. Just bear with me, brothers. This is in the book of... I'll go to just a book over. The book of Ephesians. This is the book of Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. It's a beautiful precept. It's one of my favorite precepts. I'll start at... this is Ephesians 2 and 8. It says, for by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of the Most High. So only by that grace in Yahawashi, through that faith and that belief in Yahawashi, that's how we're to receive salvation. That's our righteousness, and that's ultimately how we're justified. It's not by our works in keeping the law. I'll read verse 9. It says, not of works, lest any man should boast. And we as a nation, we don't have anything to boast about. Anything that we boast about is supposed to be in the glorification of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahawashi. You know what I'm saying? But that's pretty much the point I wanted to get on that. But at the same time, the balance of it is because in saying and emphasizing the importance on believing in Yahawashi and having faith on Yahawashi, people are trying to distort our doctrine like we're not teaching our people to keep the law, when we always explain the importance of keeping the law, But we know that that's not the end all be all, and the works of the law, that's not what's going to justify a man. But Yahawashi even himself, he requires us to keep the law. And I'm going to read out of the book of Matthew, St. Matthew, the 5th chapter. And if you have a red letter Bible, this will be the words of Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, speaking in this verse. This is St. Matthew 5, and I'll start at 17. It says, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So Yahawashi, he didn't come to destroy the law of old, of the prophets, because that's all he was quoting, was the prophets and things that were written in the old law. So that just goes further to show that Yahawashi, he kept the law. You know what I'm saying? He taught his disciples to keep the law. And as men in the faith, out pushing and preaching of Yahawashi today, we're supposed to keep the law. But having the understanding that everything is guided by the spirit of our faith in Yahawashi. Ultimately, that's what's going to lead to salvation. You know what I'm saying? So you're supposed to keep the law. And I'll read one more just so these guys, these scoffers out there, they won't try to say that Great Millstone. They'll try to say that Great Millstone teaches people that we ain't supposed to keep the law. And that's not the argument. We always qualify things, man. The law is not going to justify you in this flesh, man. I don't know why it's so hard to see, but, hopefully for brothers that, this may be a topic of misunderstanding. Hopefully it'll shed some light on this, man, and, edify brothers. This is Romans, the 3rd chapter, and I'll start at, it's the point I want to get. I think it's, okay, actually, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit. This is Romans 3:27. It says, where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. So these guys, man, that talk about, especially in IUIC, man, basically trying to make our people try to keep the law, which we know that our people can't keep the law, perfectly. You know what I'm saying? Our faith in Yahawashi, man, that's the law of faith. I'm going to read that again, actually. Romans 3:27, it says, where is boasting then? It is excluded by what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. So having that faith, having that belief on Yahawashi, you know what I'm saying? That's the law of faith that the true men of the Lord are supposed to roll in the lot of, man. Now, under the law of faith, you're gonna keep the law, of the prophets, the old Levitical, the old Mosaic laws. You know what I'm saying? Through your faith in Yahawashi, it says, this is verse 28. Therefore, we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law, because basically, if you break one law, man, then basically you guilty in all. So we're not justified by the deeds of the law. We're only justified by the faith in Yahawashi, because he kept the law perfect, and he was that sacrificial lamb that died to bring us back into the fold. But this is the point I wanted to get, that you are supposed to keep the law. Romans 3:31, it says, do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law. So that law of faith that it talked about in Romans 3:27, man, basically that faith and belief on Yahawashi, then you're going to keep the actual law. You know what I'm saying? It's a balance, but we know at the end of the day, that's not what's going to justify you. But we keep the law, for guys that want to try to say that Great Millstone teaches people not to keep the law. We teach our people to keep the law, but it's with the understanding that everything is guided by the spirit of our faith in Yahawashi at the end of the day, So with that, hopefully, that'll edify brothers who may have any misunderstanding on this particular topic, because it seems like it's always going to come up. So, more videos will probably follow suit, if the spirit allows. So I just want to say, call halal, Yahawashi, Yahawashi. And with that, just want to say shalom, Akim.